Hello and welcome to my 2 hours crash course. Now, this is the walkthrough for the DevOps Stage 3 task, HNJ DevOps Stage 3 task. Now, this task requires me to deploy a Python application behind Nginx that interacts with RabbitMQ and Celery for email sending and login functionality. And I have used a Flask web framework, which is a Python web framework to develop the application, and I used Celery, which is a distributed queue system, to run the email sending tasks in the background, and also RabbitMQ will queue these tasks such that Celery workers can pick these tasks from the queue and execute them. This way, our main application does not have to worry about executing the email sending tasks or having to wait for the email sending tasks to execute finish before it continues with other processes. Now let's move on. Now let's move on to the prerequisites for this project. So the prerequisites for this project is the Python, RabbitMQ, ngrok, Nginx, and I have all of them installed on my local machine. So let's move on to the main application structure. So this is the project structure. The messaging system serves as a root folder. Then the app folder is where I have my app code and Celery underscore config.py code. That should be underscore config. Yeah. And then we have the venv, then the nginx. The venv is a virtual environment folder. So I created a virtual environment. And what this does is it runs my application and its dependencies in an isolated environment. And the reason why this is needed is because when we run our application and everything is in a virtual isolated environment, it's it prevents our dependencies from conflicting with other Python application dependencies that we might later run on this our local machine. Now moving on, we have the nginx.conf, and under the nginx.conf, I've defined configurations that will allow the nginx web server to serve my application. Then under requirements.txt are the modules or the dependencies that are required to set up this application. Then after that, under the .env are the variables needed for this application. So let's move on to developing this application. So the first thing we need to do is activate the virtual environment. But I have activated that already, and we can see it's activated. So I created virtual environment using this first command and activated it with the second command. And the next thing to do is install the dependencies required by this application, and you must be in the directory of your application which is running in the virtual environment to be able to run this, install these dependencies in that virtual environment. So I've done that already, and let me show you. And that's it. I'm in that directory of my project. So the next thing I want to do after that is, about installing all the dependencies I need, is to run Celery. But before we run Celery, let's see our code. Let's see the code I've developed and how it works. So this is the app.py, which is my main Python code that I've written in Flask. And I started by importing the necessary modules I need in this application. So the OS to load our environment variables, the time for the timestamping function, then the flags, the request, the response, the load.env to load environment variables, Celery, our distributed queue system, queue management system. Then the next one is make Celery. So I've defined the Celery configuration here, and I've defined a function that enables us to use Celery. So what I did here was to import that function from this my celery.py file into this main application using import and from. Then after that, I will load the environment variables using this. Then the next line, I will create an instance of this application. And after that, the next block is to configure the mail server, configure the mail server. So these are the configurations, or let's say values, that the mail server will need to send mails out to recipient's email address. So this os.get file gets the Gmail user from the .env. This is .env. I've defined our Gmail user. That will be our host email address, which will be responsible for sending mails out. So I've defined that here, and the password, which is an app password I got from my Gmail account. This is it. I got it from here. I created it under the app passwords and I used it in the .env file. So since both are in the .env file, we use the os.getEnv to get them and save them in the mail username. So these parameters here, the mail server, the mail port, the mail uses SSL, and the username and password is what the mail module here we use to send mail out to recipient's email address. Now, the next block configures the Celery. For Celery to connect with the RabbitMQ, and RabbitMQ our message broker, it needs to be able to connect with it. So it uses this URL to be able to connect with it. The first one is to enable connection with RabbitMQ, and the second one is to enable us to be able to store tags and kill tags and retrieve them from RabbitMQ. Then after that, we initialize the mail module in this our application to be able to use it. So that will be mail. And also we initialize Celery in this application to be able to use Celery in this our application. Next, we want to register the send email function. So we'll create a function which will be responsible for sending email, and we'll register this function as a Celery tag. So Celery can help us run this function in the background, and that's what we're going to do. So this is the next block of code that configures that function. It creates that function. So and this function also is expecting a parameter or yes, or an argument, and you can see it in the message here. So it uses the message module to construct our mail. So this is the header for our mail, and this is the Gmail user, the host user that will be responsible for sending mails out, and the recipient, which will be the receiver email, our recipient email address where we're supposed to send the mail to. Then under the message dot body, this defines the content of our mail that we'll be sending out. Then next here is a function we've described, a logic that sends the mail out using the mail we've constructed here, and it sends it to this receiver mail as we've constructed it. I should send it to this receiver mail, and this receiver mail from is gotten from the query that tests this that tests the endpoint of our application with the send mail value. So let's continue to the next block of code, and this is an exception here, an exception logic that handles any error. So if you get any error, it will be saved in this e variable, and then it will be printed out. So to print error sending email, and the main error that we faced will be printed out. So this helps us to log errors and issues on the terminal so we could easily debug them. Next is the route. So we want to create an endpoint on our application that can receive requests. So we define route. So this one creates a root endpoint, and we want to define the functionality of this endpoint. Next is we configure a parameter, the send me parameter, that expects an argument. It expects an argument. So if this endpoint is queried with the send mail, the value of that send mail is sent to the send mail parameter, and this is executed. This if here is executed. If nothing is passed to the send mail, meaning if this part is not queried with the send mail argument, then we'll check for this next one, which is the talk to me, which is the talk to me argument. And if we have a talk to me argument, then this will run to print the log to log to run the time stamping functionality, which will log the current time at that moment the part was queried, or that endpoint was queried. Then else, if nothing, if no parameter is passed, if no argument is passed here and here, then it will return the default page of our application, which is welcome to stage 3 task messaging system. Then we want to define the logs route. So under the logs route, we want to display the content of our log file. So all the logs, all the timestamps that have been logged here is saved into var messaging system dot log. I want to print them out when the user we want the user to be able to see them when they access this part, which is part slash logs. So we define a function for that and ensure that the app is opened, the file is open, the log file is opened, and the contents are displayed when the server access slash logs. Then this last line here is to start our application, start the development server, and the bug equals to true enables us to be able to see logs on the terminal when we run this our application. Then the celery config.py, I think I've explained this already, and the .env defines our configurations that we need. So that is it for our application. Now let's test the functionality of our application. Let's start it. So the first thing you want to do before you start your application is to start RabbitMQ. Don't forget it's a message broker that will kill the tags, so we have to start it. So to start RabbitMQ, let's come to one of these. So let's check the command to start it. I have them here already. So this is the command to start it. This is the command to even install it, but I have it installed already, so we don't need to do that. Then I would like to activate the dashboard. So let's activate the dashboard. So sudo, I have to enter my password. Okay, it's activating the dashboard. Good. The next thing we want to do is we want to ensure that the RabbitMQ server is properly stopped so it doesn't conflict with us or doesn't fight us when we're trying to start the RabbitMQ server. So let's do that. Let's do that. Okay, paste it here. So oh no, that's the command to start it. That's not the one I'm looking for. This is the one I'm looking for. So paste it here, and I remove this former one. Good. Good. That should have stopped it. So let's start this server. Okay, so let's start it. So let's start the RabbitMQ server. Okay. So I paste this code there. Let me hide this. RabbitMQ server. RabbitMQ server is booting up. Good, there we have it. To start it. So RabbitMQ server is up and running and is ready to connect with our Celery. So let's start the Celery. So to start the Celery, you must be in the directory of your project because that's where we install Celery in that environment. So you must be in that environment. So let's go to the environment. So in the environment here, so we'll start Celery here. And to start Celery, we'll use the command celery-a, the name of our application app dot celery. So the name of our application app, and don't forget in our application we have a Celery instance running inside it that we've defined. So to be app.celery worker, then dash dash log level to be able to see logs. So let's use that to start. Good. Let's use that to start our application. So this creates a Celery worker. Okay, so let's run it here. Let's paste it here. Let me copy that again. Search and paste. Okay, so this should start Celery for us. Good. Our Celery is running, it's searching for neighbors all alone, and our Celery is ready. And this here is the Celery worker, which will be responsible for executing tasks in the background. After that, we want to start our application. So we also start our application in the applications directory. So here we have list. You see, we have our app.py there. So we want to start it. So let's start the app.py. What's the command to start it? So it should be Python 3 app.py. So let's start it. 3 app.py, and this should start our application first. Good. You can see it's running development server, and we can also see the logs. So anything that is happening with our application, we see the logs here because we used, if we use this line here, we start development server in the debug mode. So with our application running, we want to test it. So let's test it from this endpoint here, this local endpoint. Let's copy that and go to our browser and see if everything is working fine with our application. So let's come to this one and let's paste it here and see. Good. You can see it displays this message. Welcome to stage 3 task messaging system. That means we're accessing our root part here. So let's also try to access. Okay, let's try to um, access one of the functionalities, which is the okay, send mail. Okay, let me see it here. I think I have it here. So let me try to use it to send. Okay, so let me query this endpoint with the send mail value and use my email address as the parameter here, then send, and let's see if it works. Okay, before I do that, let me delete the former message I got. So okay, that's deleted. Let's run it. Let's run it. Good. So sending email to my email address, and let's check if it's working. Good. You can see the header that we've constructed and the content of the message. This is a test email from stage 3 task. That is working fine. Next thing we want to do is test the second functionality, which is talk to me. So we'll query the talk to me. So we query that endpoint with the talk to me parameter. This. So let's do that now and see if it works. If it's going to log messages. Okay, so that'll be so talk to me. Good. It's logging message. So if we refresh, it keeps logging the message. I've refreshed several times. So now let's check if it's working. So let's access our logs. Don't forget, in our application we defined the logs route. So let's try and access that logs. Good. You can see our logs. So our application is working very, very fine. And mind you, we can also see logs from the Celery instance here. You can see tags app.send email. It got the tags, then they sent, then it executes that tag. So this Celery worker executes the tags from the queue. So it collects the tags from the RabbitMQ and executes it. Normally, when we first send the tags, to it gets queued on RabbitMQ. So the Celery will send the tags to RabbitMQ to queue it there. So the next thing we want to test now is exposing our application. Okay, before we expose the application, let's configure the nginx. Yes, let's configure the nginx. So we have the nginx file, but I haven't configured it yet. So if we run, let me test it here. If we run localhost, see, it's not serving our application. So let's configure that. So here we have the nginx.conf file to configure it, and you can see here the server name is localhost, meaning when we put localhost on our browser, it should route our request to http if we're on the root part, or if we're on the /logs part, it should route our request to our application, which is running on 5000 and /logs part. So doing that now, we have to ensure that nginx can make use of this. So to do that, we have to okay. So we have to place this in. So to do that, actually, sorry, I'm looking for a tab. Okay, so to do that, we have to place this in the site in the nginx site available directory. So there's a default page. There's a default page as site available, but we replace that. So let's go to cd. Okay, we're in the nginx directory. So list. So now the site's enabled. Let's say it's site enabled. Let's see the into it. So inside then we have a file which is default, but we want to replace that default with our own. So we'll first back up this one. So I'll back it up is then move default to default. So I'll basically rename it to back it up BKP, which represents backup. Sorry, my bad. I should run that with the sudo command. Okay, try the password. Good, and that is working fine. So we should list now for the backup. So we have to copy our own file here. So to copy it, let's use one of these commands here. And the next copy this. I want you to copy to the sites enabled as default. So let's copy that. So this will copy our Nginx file as the new default file. So let's paste it here. Good. So we list now. We have it as default. We have it here as default. All right. So the next thing we want to do is test if our configuration is all working fine. So come in, copy this command, paste it here. Good. Since our syntax is correct and everything is working fine, so the next one to do is restart Nginx so the changes will reflect. Oh, she's just the lights. Oh god. Okay, let me switch on the lights. Sorry about that. Okay. So let's continue. So we reload so everything reflects. Good. So now we've successfully configured Nginx, and let's see if that statement is true. So let's go to Scrummin and run localhost. Oh shit, that's not working. Sorry. Ah, God. How's this thing doing like this now? Stop now. Okay, should work fine now. Oh, God. Oh,